Some things just go together. Wine and cheese, flowers in springtime, and yes, books and bottles. We pair your favorite author with your favorite drink. Your host of Books and Bottles, Benita Johnson.
Hello and welcome to Books and Bottles. I'm your host, Benita Johnson. This is our show where we pair your favorite author and their work with a wine or spirit. So if this is your first time, welcome to our show. If you've been with us before, we appreciate you for coming back. Please share because we want everybody to take a part of this wonderful and important experience. So tonight I have a young lady on. Her name is Teresina L. Jackson. And she's talking about the dirty little family secrets. The name of her book is The Code of Silence. And this is something that a lot of us, whether you experienced it or not, you at least know someone who has. So I invite and welcome Miss Teresina L. Jackson to the show.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. It's finally good to meet you.
Right.
We talked a lot on Facebook. So I wanted to hold up your book in the light. And I love the cover because it's family, right? It gives
Absolutely,
this is everybody's grandma, aunt's family wall. We got all these people in our life. So I appreciate you for being on. So tell us a little bit about you before we delve into the book.
And well, like you said, I'm Teresina Jackson. I am a self-published author as well as I own a virtual assistant company and I'm an advocate for mental health and wellness. I have 2 children, a 21-year-old as well as a 21-year-old as well as a 6-year-old, 2 boys. I am just recently relocated back to my hometown of Saginaw, Michigan. I was born in California. My mom is from Saginaw. Her and my father got together a long time ago and moved here. So I'm actually experiencing some of that code of silence right now. So this is so on time to share my story with you all and how I've traveled this journey. Childhood trauma, domestic violence, sexual abuse, and being able to triumph, being able to crack that code and learn how to use your voice when you come from a community that practices the code of silence, that practices not being vocal about the things that transpire in our families. So I'm someone, go ahead.
I want to ask you about the code of silence. And basically, I mean, it's the title of the book, but it's kind of a blanket description of things that we all families hold in, right? You know, whether
right. And I remember when we started to write the book, I worked with an older gentleman. He was a mentor at that time from Flint, Michigan. I was living in Georgia at the time, so it was so amazing to connect with someone from home who could have that hometown feel. And I didn't have a name at the time, and it just landed on me, just the way that, God will put things on your heart and move your heart. And initially the code of silence came because at some point.
I do like that name because everybody knows a statement that you use in your book. What happens in this house stays in this house.
Right. And so that itself is the code of silence. It's because we don't deal with any of our family issues or things that happen in our overall family. We don't speak about them publicly. We are very quiet if we speak about them at all. We know that things happen in the family, but we don't have outward discussion about it. And so this was like the dirty little family secrets came shortly after, and I was like, this is what it is. This is the secrets that we want to hide, whether it's domestic violence or alcoholism or overeating or gambling, or it doesn't have to be that severe. There are things that go on in our home that we are quiet about.
So do you see any socioeconomic differences in the families that choose to be quiet about things versus families that things come out, or is it kind of?
I think that when confronted, and I'm not sure about other communities and how often they confront, because I think that the code of silence isn't necessarily race-based, but because it's not my experience, I focused on our community because I think it's more prevalent.
Yeah.
We are much more known for that code of silence, because if you travel into Caucasian communities and you travel into these religious cults, they practice a lot of the same behavior, but they call it, polygamy and things of that nature. And so it gets a different spin than it does in the Black community.
Point. That's
absolutely.
But I was just looking at, like, if it's like in our community, the Black and brown community, if it's like, a pride thing or religious thing.
I think the core issue is slavery and the mindset. I think that when it comes to sexual abuse and just abuse in general, and this is my core belief, is that when you travel back into our stories, these things were happening through slave masters and teaching us to behave towards one another, being in these, what they would call like human zoos. And the way that we were treated. I think that some of the mentality, some of the exposure is not who we are as core people. I think it's the behavior that we were exposed to. I think it's deeply rooted in things that happen in our household. Like, my grandmother was 6 years old the first time that she was molested by her stepfather. If you go back into my family, maybe over 100 years of my own history, it's rooted in sexual trauma, but the trauma is very closely related to how my grandmother, they were treated by the slave masters and how they were exposed and exploited. And those things started to happen in the home. Behavior started to become mimicked in the home. So then here's my grandmother at 12 years old, and she's sold off to a man as a handmaid by my grandmother, my great grandmother. This is behavior that slave masters. Do you understand what I'm saying?
And absolutely. And I think it's, it definitely could be a learned behavior.
Right. But I think every household is different. Because I know families that, are well-to-do and well put together and two-parent home, and it looks a certain way. And we think, like you said, socioeconomic, and is it poverty-stricken? Does it come from those type of homes? I don't think so.
Right.
I think that it's a mindset, and I think part of it is very much a learned behavior. Most of the people that I've met that have been molested, that experienced any sort of pedophilia behavior or what would be considered weird sexual behavior, there's some rape and molestation, and things are behind that. You understand what I'm saying? It's not just coming from anywhere.
So what made you want to write this book?
And my own struggle trying to figure this out, trying to understand what was transpiring in my family, because it wasn't just our household. Seeing it in multiple households, seeing women go from two-parent households, the 80s, crack addiction, seeing, the communities just completely fall apart from the experiences that I had, and how it impacted me and how it impacted my children. And in the beginning of the healing process, maybe like 12 years ago, Benita, someone said, you need to go back into your ancestral lineage and you need to find out what happened before you, because some of these things have nothing to do with you. And so that began the journey. And wanting to tell my story, but afraid to bring shame on the family and all of that. And eventually it was like, you have to, it won't go away when it's your gift, when it's your purpose, when it's your ministry. It just keeps calling. It just keeps calling. So in my own healing process, this was necessary.
So was the book like one of the first steps in your healing, the writing of it, or?
No. I went through so many different journeys. I do believe that I was always reaching to recover or heal myself in some capacity since I've been like maybe 9 years old. But with intention and with purpose, about 12 years ago, after being arrested, for me, I understood that it was actually a blessing. It was God's intervention.
Okay.
To do that. To intercede on my behalf, because I knew standing in front of that judge, I was like, I ain't got no business being over here. Yeah. I'm too smart. I'm to this. I'm to that. Even though I come from this, I've accomplished so much. I'm not supposed to be here. Just knowing.
Yeah. But you know, it's real special to know that that was a blessing. And that's probably something that
it saved my life. It saved
Yeah.
my life to
It
understand
saved
that
your
I have been blessed, and to be able to travel that journey, and meet some amazing people who were invested in me and didn't know me, but they recognized too, like, you're not supposed to be here. And so I met a judge who helped me get the help that I needed. I didn't need prison time. I needed mental and emotional ability and, well, you know, starting to begin that healing journey. So I started then. And
that's a good thing, because, you know, imagine if more judges, you know, had the foresight
that
this isn't criminal, this is mental. And
well, he was actually, backtrack a little bit. He was a former judge when I met him. He actually was pretty much pushed off the bench and became a criminal defense attorney because he was giving people who had drug and alcohol problems or mental health problems, he was giving them rehab and drug court. He wasn't giving them prison time. And because he wasn't doing that, eventually he was pushed off the bench. And so he started to defend people. Right. And the system, you know, we know that the system doesn't work for us. And so I just met somebody great who could see in me what I couldn't see in myself at that time. And he batted for me. And he told me, if you listen, I will get you off this case. And I knew enough to listen.
Okay.
I do what you say, Teresina.
So I had another question. We'll come back to that question. But with working with a person like him, is that what inspired you to become an advocate for people who have some issues?
No, and that's just because, I mean, of course, meeting people along the way encourage you to keep going. But I've always been this way. I've always been someone who's been interested in advocacy and justice. My mom was on drugs for a long time. I grew up amongst community centers that went from community centers to at-risk youth centers to nothing. And so in traveling that journey, I've worked at after-school programs that were geared towards at-risk kids. I've always been involved in my community in some kind of way, because I personally invested because of my own childhood.
Okay, so the question I was going to ask you first, but before we get into the book, is how did your family receive the idea of the book?
They don't. I will say that a lot of people in my family have an opinion on the book, but they haven't read it. And so it's speculation, right? It's speculation in what they assume isn't true. A lot of their focus is on the molestation. And is that true or isn't that true? As of probably about a year ago is the last time I've heard any sort of negative correspondence, but I'm in a no contact space.
Okay.
So I actually bumped into my aunt like twice in the last couple of weeks, and I was like, whoa. Because it makes them very uncomfortable, and it makes me uncomfortable too. Don't get me wrong. It's not an easy journey to tell your story. It's riddled with trauma. But
the people who did these actions, are they still alive? Are they still with us?
One of my relatives has passed away. He's been passed away for quite some time. The rest of the people are living, and we all live in the same city. It's a very small town.
Wow.
And I just moved back here after not living here for 12 years. And so what I do understand is that my presence is big. And so my story actually is like, it's the Mississippi secrets that my family has buried.
Yeah.
When I say something, I'm rattling the cage. I'm bringing up things that they don't want to talk about.
That's pretty awkward at Thanksgiving, huh?
Yeah, right. Exactly. And like I said, we have so much trauma. Like I am on my dad's side of the family. We are direct descendants of Michael Jackson. And if you travel their family tree, it's a lot of the domestic violence and sexual abuse. And so it's not far-fetched. That, you know, one of their uncles was married to my grandmother. I mean, it was very, very abusive. And so it's just kind of that trickle down effect. You've seen my uncles and my father become abusive to their mates and just mimicking what they saw. And my aunts married men that were abusive. And it's just, you know, it's definitely been a cycle. So myself and maybe one other person, two other people in my family that I know of are vocal.
Okay.
The
Because
rest,
I was going to ask.
yeah. Oh no, honey,
Come out
no,
and
no,
say
no.
things. Did anybody say
No.
that happened to me too?
They quietly talk about it, but because this is a part of my journey, it's a part of my, my ministry, my business. Because I'm vocal about it, I get the, the negative attention or but they do. Like I've had cousins recently come out and say, hey, this happened to me, or things that have happened recently in the family, but it's the code of silence. You can talk about it within the family. Certain family members can talk about it. But it's the conversation. It's all that pink elephant in the room. Like we know this happened, but we're not going to deal with it in a manner that could actually bring about, real healing and change in our family. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh,
so once you started to have children, and I heard you say you have two sons, and a lot of times we think about, or society has taught us that only women can be victims, but we know that things happen to
oh my God,
boys and men as well.
Yeah.
So as a parent, how did you, or what tools did you try to instill in your boys that if some of the similar things that you saw in your family happened to them, that they would ring the alarm to you?
Right. I'm just teaching them about, but teaching them about their private parts. My youngest boy is autistic, so that's a different journey than my 21-year-old. My 21-year-old, we definitely talked about inappropriate touch and, communication and it not mattering, who it is. But, unfortunately, you think that you've given them all of the tools, and even knowing that it happens close to home, it's still the probability.
It's still
Right.
Because the thing about the trickery and the deception that goes into sometimes coercing these young people to do things that we don't even know what they're doing.
Right.
They
don't have a full understanding.
Yeah, and they're like way ahead of us. So we're teaching to try to look for this, so avoid this, but they're teaching there's a new game,
and you don't know what who's been touching them, or what what's been transpiring. And so it's definitely, as much as you think that it won't happen, like I've had my own experience with my oldest son, and it just was like not shocking, but in the same breath, like I can't even believe I missed that. I can't even believe I missed that. And traveling that journey with him, but also understanding it's so rampant in my family.
Okay.
That there's probably nobody that hasn't been touched in one, and that's so unfortunate, but it's that bad.
I didn't know, I guess until I was about 18, about how things were going on in my family.
Yeah.
Because, that, didn't happen to me.
Right.
But a cousin said that it happened to her.
Right.
And so it's like, then the rest of the family, they were saying, well, they asked, did it happen to me? I was like, no, what, I wasn't the one.
Right.
So they just kind of assumed that it didn't happen to her either. And I was like, no, that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Right. And then I remember one of my aunts saying that happened to all of us. We just don't talk about it. And at that moment,
especially the older ones,
I was like, I gotta talk to, whenever I have kids, I have to talk to my kids so that, if this happens, you're comfortable telling me whatever. And like I taught my kids proper names of their body parts. I want it to be, if you tell me somebody touched your vagina, I want it.
I know. You don't call it TP or anything like that. It's
proper name. And I taught, and she could hardly even say it, but when she would go and stay with somebody else, she would come home. First thing she said, "Nobody touched my vagina, mommy." I was like, okay, because I knew what she meant.
Right, but still, there's just the communication piece.
Yes.
Even if
I didn't even have to ask. It's like she just told me. It's like, okay.
Right. I mean, again, because you teach. I remember the transition of feeling like I'm telling my oldest son that, policemen and ambulance drivers, all of these people are safe people, but there was a change and a shift in my mid-20s. I was like, oh, wait,
Yeah.
I've got to even be more careful in because that could be a setup. And blindly trust these people because they have on this uniform, and these are people that could cause them harm. So it's a journey. It is a journey. It is a journey, very much mental, and coming out of that and unraveling.
So did you feel any level of relief? I don't know, like before you had your oldest son, if how your thinking was, if you were thinking this happens to girls. So I was going to ask, did you feel any relief that you gave birth to a boy?
No. Okay. I remember him being like 3 and 4 years old and people telling me that, like, I remember a guy I was dating saying he was too old for me to bathe him. And mind you, the guy didn't know I had been molested, but in the back of my mind, I had already started feeling uncomfortable around him because of my own issues with being molested and wondering, you know what I mean? Wondering to myself, am I touching him wrong? Is this okay?
Wow.
Oh, yes.
Even though you knew your control and this is your baby.
I still was like, I don't know if this, and so I remember when he made mention to that, I immediately start teaching my oldest boy how to wash himself because I was afraid that this would look a certain way. Oh man, just the misinformation.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of conversation that happens in various circles about when is it, when are kids too old to sleep in bed?
Right. When I breastfed and that, that was a journey.
Did you do that too long? And it was always all of these things. And I always thought, that's so weird because it's our parents and,
Right. Why are we even having to have
they're this? 80. I wish my dad could come back, right now. I would crawl right in the bed, but.
Right.
Yeah,
because we grew up in these environments that the code of silence existed. So here I am now teaching my daughter to protect herself, dress herself a certain way. But I'm not saying why. Because Uncle Charlie is molesting the kids.
Well, we need to address Uncle Charlie. Because
responsibility on the child.
Say, we always put the responsibility on that person. She shouldn't dress like that.
Yes.
She shouldn't have been. She shouldn't have been around them.
You're right. Because
pervert, you shouldn't touch the kids.
Exactly. What absolves parents of responsibility, even going back and having these conversations 10, 15, 20 years later, and elder members still having a very hard time having these conversations and me being frustrated, like, this is the thing that sets us free, though. This is the thing that helps us move forward, but you are refusing, to just hold the conversation, and understand from a different perspective. But like I said, a lot of my family members, specifically women, were molested and abused and raped and domestic violence. And so some of that becomes so normal, or we normalize it and rationalize it and minimize it. So it's a hard conversation to have.
So you say, you start out just the book jacket. You say 1 in 4 Black girls will be sexually abused before the age of 18.
That's the statistic that is out. And it's unfortunate, but I actually believe it. I've hosted events where I've been taken off my feet by 20 women in a room, and all of us have been molested. All of them had been sexually assaulted, or, in some way, shape, or form, we had experienced some level of sexual abuse or exploitation or rape. And you just go, whoa.
And I think about when I saw that statistic, immediately, Teresina, I thought it was low, because I said, what's the parameters? You know how it is. Some people say this is. Yeah.
The stats around it. And
but really, it's some gray over here. And so, I was like, okay, only 1 in 4, because it's so many people that we know that something has occurred.
Right, and boys are so underreported. And mind you, this 1 in 4 is just the information that's on record. This is not a true depiction of all of the Black and brown girls who have absolutely been molested and who have not reported.
But even at 25%, that's high. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
That's
Now,
a
mind
lot.
you, the article that, I did this research, they talk about boys, and it's just as high. It's just that we don't have a conversation about young boys like we do young girls. And a lot of young Black men that I've met, and older Black men, they actually celebrate the fact that they were 12 and this 20-something-year-old had sex with them or touched them inappropriately, because it's actually a badge of honor. It's not seen as molestation or rape or, misconduct in any way, shape, or form.
Insane. At that,
Yeah. Trust me, there's only very few men that I've met that go, I was assaulted by a teacher or a family member, or most of them are like, yeah, because when I was 12, I'm going, wait. Do you not understand that this person did not have the right?
Absolutely.
No.
I am so, that's so,
No.
wow.
No, that's not. No, trust me, that is not the norm of the conversation. They don't see it as molestation. I do see a lot of younger boys, younger men, my son's age, in the music industry that are starting very small conversation. I've seen a few artists talk about molestation, which I'm excited. I'm super excited to even hear them starting the conversation, because it's one that I even encourage my son to have.
And being comfortable, just being comfortable putting things out there. I think that's
right. Well, they're artists, so I'm like, use your music to tell that story, to channel that, because usually what happens to boys, what I see is they either, based on molestation alone or any sort of sexual abuse as a young child, you see them become super angry, and then they become violent and behavioral problems, criminals, or you see them go the other direction with two different directions, very recluse inside themselves, shy, awkward, socially awkward, or you see them start to practice same-sex relationships, because a lot of them have been sexually abused by the same sex. It's just not a conversation. It's not a conversation that's happening loudly enough.
I have one more question for you. Do you have any insight or suggestions or ideas to help people become more comfortable just kind of being the whistleblower in their own households?
Right. Oh man, I don't know if there's an easy way, because like I told, I reached out and I found all kinds of ways to try to communicate. So I think that, you definitely go to the people that you feel safest with, and you do your best to share, and what, because I don't, the age frame, obviously the jargon is different, depending upon the listener. But you do your best to communicate that to, and I would say go outside of your family. I went inside of my family looking for help. And I really didn't find any sort of help until I started to reach outside, and I started to reach to neighbors. I started to reach to, anybody that would listen outside of my house home. And I started to get a little bit of help, but this is a different era and time where definitely less police involvement, less CPS involvement. Times have changed from back then, but I would say reach out to your teachers and your principals and your clergy members, somebody who is bound by oath to report, so that you're not the one if you are afraid. Find a way to use your voice, because I remember having to tell a therapist because I didn't have the voice to tell on a family member. Anyway, you can.
I appreciate you for sharing your story. Yeah. And prayerfully, your book, The Code of Silence, Dirty Little Family Secrets, will inspire other people to step out and tell their stories. How can people get your book?
You can purchase my book on Amazon, The Code of Silence, Dirty Little Family Secrets. You can find me on Facebook as well.
Thank you so much, Teresina, for being here. I'm glad we finally got you on.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
We're going to be keeping up with you and seeing what else you got coming up.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's other authors out there and you'd like to be a part of Books and Bottles, please email us at info@grosprod.com. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. Remember to hit that share button. We want to grow our audience. So until next week, thank you for tuning in to Books and Bottles. Cheers.
Camped out at home for COVID? Join us, Indie TV, where you will see the talk shows, movies, drama, action, and comedy. Be the first and see it first. Sign up now for free at Indie TV.